Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my trailer park white trash mobile home kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Every guy I know thinks that they make the best pizza. Well, I'm here to set the record straight. I make the best pizza. I tried to do that with a straight face and I couldn't do it. Oh well, I'll never get it right. I have my own way of making pizza. I like making pizza. My friends know about my pizza. I know what a real Italian pizza is. They make their own dough. They put on a tomato sauce and only use buffalo, mozzarella, and whole fresh basil leaves, the three colors, the red sauce, the cheese, and the green leaves are supposed to give you the three colors of the flag of Italy. Here in America, we add more toppings. So I like to use Italian sausage, no beef or meatballs in mine. And then I use some onions, some pepperoni, some, what was the other thing? Mushrooms. I take my time making a pizza. This is not like a pizzeria pizza where they throw all the ingredients on top and throw it in the oven. I pre-do a lot of stuff as far as my toppings go, and I will show you that. So let me get into the ingredients that I use for making my homemade pizza. For my pizza crust, my dough, I have 12 ounces of flour by weight. I weigh this. If you measure your flour by scooping the flour out of the container with a measuring cup, figure about 2 1/4 to 2 1/3 cup of scooped flour. If you sift your flour into a measuring cup, figure 2 3/4 cup of sifted flour. I do things by weight because it's more accurate. So 12 ounces of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of active dry yeast, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 cup of warm water. The water should be between 105 and 115 degrees. Then I have 3 Italian sausages. I know these sausages are 4 ounces each, so this is 12 ounces of Italian sausage meat. This is my homemade marinara sauce. I'm going to start with about a cup, and I'm going to put that in a skillet with extra oregano to make a pizza sauce rather than a spaghetti sauce. And I'm going to simmer that for a few minutes just to thicken it down some. I don't know that I'm going to use all this sauce, but starting off with 1 cup should give me enough to use for my pizza. Anything that's left over will go back into the jar. I have 4 ounces of pepperoni, 6 mushrooms, 4 if you have large mushrooms. These are the white button mushrooms you find at the grocery store. These aren't gourmet mushrooms. If I were making something like mushroom risotto, I'd probably use shiitake mushrooms. But these mushrooms aren't going to be the highlight of my pizza, so just regular old store-bought white button mushrooms are going to be good enough for my pizza. I have 8 ounces of mozzarella that I've chopped up. And then I'm going to be using about 1/2 of this onion that I'm going to cook for about 10 minutes to partially caramelize my onion. So these are the ingredients that I use for my pizza. Okay, my first step here is to get my dough started. I'm going to put not all of that in there, about half that flour. And I'll show you the reason why in a moment. I'm going to measure my water here. It's 109, 110 degrees. Now it's saying 113, 114. The higher up you get, the hotter it gets, I guess. So this is fine. And then I'm going to put my yeast in there. I'm not going to put my salt in just yet. And get this mixed up. Just in time for a plane to go over. It's a small one. And kind of make a wet, almost a batter here. And I'm going to let this sit for about 5 minutes just to get my yeast all hot and bothered and interested in reproducing. And then I'm going to put the rest of my flour and work my salt in. So I'm going to let this sit for 5 minutes. Okay, my dough has been sitting here for about 5 minutes. I'm already seeing some air bubbles in there, so that's good. That's a good indicator that my yeast is okay. So now I'm going to put in the rest of my flour and add my salt. The reason why I add my salt at the end, some recipes say that yeast isn't crazy about salt. It's best to add the salt at the end when it can be more or less diluted with the flour so that it doesn't discourage the yeast from multiplying, reproducing. This is only going to mix so well at this point. I'm really going to have to put it onto the counter and then knead it. Gonna scrape the sides of my bowl here, my spoon. Okay. And then move this onto the counter. I have some dough still in my spoon here. And this is going to be sticky dough. I know this formula of moisture to flour is going to make a sticky dough, but as I work this, and you can see right there how sticky it is, as I work through this, it's going to build up its elasticity and become less sticky. All right, so I'm going to knead this for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll see what it looks like. I can always add more flour, sprinkle just a little bit of flour into it if I need it to get rid of some of the stickiness. Okay, so you can see what's happened with my dough here. I've been kneading this for a while. It's nice and smooth, it's soft. It's a little bit sticky, see where it's sticking to my fingers there, but not bad. For the most part, that's a good dough. It's a little bit elastic there. That elasticity will actually improve as it rises. So my next step then is to put this into a bowl and then put it in a warm place. I use the top of my refrigerator and let this dough rise for about an hour. For comparison purposes, I want you to see this dough when I just put it into the bowl. After about an hour, this will come up pretty high and be almost to the top of this bowl. So that's what I want. I want it to be about doubled in bulk. All right, my first step here is to get this sauce thickened. I'm starting off, as I mentioned, with 1 cup of sauce. I don't know that I'm going to be using all of this thickened sauce on my pizza. And then because I know that pizza sauce, when I taste it, is a little bit spicier, I'm going to put a little bit of oregano in there. What's that, about a 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of oregano flakes? Yeah, that's enough. I'm not going to overdo it. Okay. And I got my heat on. And I just want to simmer this sauce enough to thicken it a little bit. I don't want it like a tomato paste. I don't want it that thick, but I want it a little bit thicker than it is here, like a spaghetti sauce. Spaghetti sauce I think of as drizzling down through the spaghetti, the pasta, whereas pizza sauce is a little bit thicker. I want it to stick to the surface. So now this is pretty thick here, thick enough. It's not like it's stiff peaks, but this is thick enough that I'm happy with that. It doesn't run like spaghetti sauce would. It's a little bit thicker. Again, it's not as thick as tomato paste. This will be fine for on my pizza. Again, if this is too much sauce, then whatever's left over, I'll just put it back in the jar and put it back in the refrigerator. I'm heating my pan here again. I'm going to put in some butter. And some olive oil. One of my cookbooks says the Italians never mix olive oil and onion and butter, rather, in a skillet. I'm doing it. I'm only half Italian. As soon as that stops sizzling, when that butter stops sizzling, it's actually the water in the butter that's boiling off. And that should be hot enough. All right, put my sliced mushrooms in there. This is probably way more than I need. But I'll just cook these up, and any that are left over, I can just salt them and nibble them. I love mushrooms. And these will go for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I just want to get them nicely sauteed. They'll absorb a lot of fat, the butter and the oil. I might add more butter or more oil to the pan as these cook. Okay, you can probably see how much those have changed color. I flip those often, and I think those will be fine. So I'm going to take this off the heat, and then I'll be ready to do my next ingredient. I've returned my pan to the heat. I didn't rinse it out. I don't need to because I need a little bit of fat in there. I'm going to remove the skin from this Italian sausage and put that in the pan. So that I cook this up. Okay. And I'm just going to break this up with a wooden spatula. This sausage meat, I like it because it doesn't have a lot of fat in it. So this is not going to yield much fat. I'm cooking this over medium-high heat. I want to get this cooked to the point where it's cooked through and maybe just lightly browned. I don't want to brown this very much. Okay, I'll keep working with that until that's cooked all the way through. So there are my Italian sausages now, my sausage meat, fully cooked there. You can see there's a little bit of browning. I did brown them very, very lightly, but not a lot. And if I tilt this pan to the side and push this up, there's no fat running out, or very little fat. I probably had as much fat in the pan when I started. That's what I like about this sausage. It's a low-fat sausage. I'm going to turn that heat off and move this back to the bowl. I did wash this bowl out so that I wouldn't cross-contaminate it. This did have the raw sausages in it. So I'm going to let this cool and move that to the bowl. I've returned my pan to the heat. I'll put my onions in there now. I chopped my onions up fairly coarse. I'm going to cook these for about 10 minutes over medium-high heat. I don't want to brown these. I want to partially caramelize them. They should reach a nice golden color without being too dark. There's a method to my madness here. Why did I do my onions last of all? It's because the onions will yield a lot of moisture as they cooked, and that moisture will deglaze the pan. From sautéing my mushrooms and my Italian sausage, there's a fond. You might even be able to see some of the little brown bits already in there. There's a fond in the bottom of the pan, and the onions will deglaze this pan and get that nicely flavored fond up off the bottom of the pan. So about 10 minutes on this. Okay, you can see the change in color there. I've turned these off, and I even added a little bit of water once in a while to the water will just boil very rapidly in a hot pan, and that instant steam will help to cook the onions quickly. So those I'm satisfied with. I'm going to turn my stove off and let those cool, and then I'll be ready to start. The cooking is done. I'll be ready to start the next step as far as assembling my pizza. This always surprises people when they see me do this. I lay out my pepperoni on, I have 3 layers of paper towels here. I'm going to put this in the microwave and then zap them on high for about 1 minute, and you'll see what happens. Can you see the change in the color with the paper towels? I'm going to press more clean paper towel on top. Look at all that color. What's happening there? Well, there's a lot of fat in pepperoni. And if you've ever had pizza and there was this orange oil pooling on top of your slices of pizza, and I've seen it plenty of times, that's the reason why, if you're having pizza with pepperoni on it. I zap mine for a minute in the microwave and let the fat rend out, and then I don't have that pool of fat on my pizza when I bake it in the oven. So that's a trick that I really like to do with pepperoni. I don't know how well you can see how that's risen, but there it is. That's almost up to the top edge of the bowl as far as the top of that dough there goes. So that's risen for an hour. A friend of mine, Harry, up in Spokane, gave me a pizza peel. So this is what I'm going to be using to cook my dough, to get my dough into the oven to cook. And it looks ugly, but here is a pizza stone. You heat this in the oven. It's got all these marks on it because that's what happens when you cook pizza on it. Oils get through onto the stone. That's how it's supposed to look. If you think that's too ugly for you, you may not want to use a pizza stone. Use a aluminum pizza tray that you can wash. I'm going to be using my pizza stone. My first step here is to shape my dough about the size of this pizza peel. So this is what I'm going to be using as far as my guide for how big to make my dough. And again, I'm going to be using parchment paper because that's what I like to use. And this will have to rise a second time. I do need my flour duster. This is my flour duster. This will help to keep the dough from sticking to my hands. I like to use parchment paper because I can spin it around as I'm shaping it. And this dough, because of the amount of flour that I use, it's not going to be an ultra thin dough. This is actually going to be a fairly thick pizza crust, which is what I like. Can go a little bit larger there. I'm not so good at this that I can toss the dough up in the air to stretch it. But I have made pizza dozens and dozens of times. All right, let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's about the size of my pizza peel. So I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and let this sit for about 45 minutes now to do a second rise, and then I'll use my parchment paper to move that dough onto my pizza peel to do my first baking. All right, here's the tricky part. Let's see if I can get away with this. My dough has been rising again for another 45 minutes. I covered my peel with cornmeal so that this will slide around. See how this slides around? That's what I want. Don't slide off the peel. And then I can slide this onto my pizza stone in the oven. And what I've done, I mean, you can't see it because it's in the oven, but I'm going to cook it for about 5 minutes on the pizza stone and then bring it back out, and then I'll be ready to put the toppings on. Okay, here's my dough. It's a little on the thick side, having just come out of my oven. The next thing I'm going to do is start covering this with my ingredients. I'm going to put my sauce on top. I like to see the crust the white part, coming through the sauce in these areas like this. My very first pizza that I made when I was a teenager, I had the sauce just pooled on top. And when I took my first bite of my pizza when it came out of the oven, all the cheese and toppings just fell off onto my chin and gave me a second-degree burn. Big blister, painful, it was awful. It eventually healed, but it was disgusting. So by having some of this white part showing through, I'm going to take a little bit of this off here, it gives the cheese something to stick to as far as on the crust goes. Okay, I like to put my Italian sausage on the sauce rather than on top of the cheese. Been doing it this way for years. I just think it comes out better. I don't know why. It's just something I started doing and liking. Again, I may not be using all of this. Okay. And then put my cheese on top. I know I'm going to use all of this. I don't have a coarse cheese shredder, so that's why this cheese is cubed. It'll still melt and be fine. And that'll melt in among the meat. Okay, lay my pepperoni on top. I probably won't use all of this, but I'll get on there as much as I can. All right, I have a few pieces left over here. That's for nibbles. Then I'm just gonna put my my sauteed mushrooms on top. This is why I pre-cook my dough, because this gets so heavy that the raw dough sticks to the peel and I can't get it off onto the pizza stone. So by pre-cooking the dough a little bit, it makes it a lot easier to slide off the peel when it gets this heavy with toppings. One more step. My lightly caramelized onion. This was a half of an onion, caramelized. And again, I may not use all of this onion on here. I don't want to completely overburden it or overload it. I don't like any flavor to really predominate. Okay. And I like to sprinkle my pizza with a little bit more oregano. I put my fingers over the end and just kind of give myself over the opening rather, and just give myself a little bit of a gap where I can sprinkle oregano through my fingers. And then a trick I learned in an Italian pizzeria when I was growing up, the pizza chef sprinkled the pizza with olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, before it went into the oven. All right, let's see if I can do this next step. I got my pizza peel again, sprinkled generously with cornmeal. My pizza goes onto the peel, and this goes back into the oven. It's a 450-degree oven. That's what I cooked the dough at for 5 minutes, and now it's going to go in for 10-15 minutes until I see some nice browning around the outside, maybe even 20 minutes, but I think 15 minutes will do it at the most. So there's my timer going off. My pizza is done. I actually did this for about 12 minutes. And there it is. Oh, that looks good. You can see some nice browning around the edges. Can you hear that noise? That's the nice crisp crust scraping against that cooling rack. This is the part that drives my guests nuts. I don't like to cut into a pizza when it first comes out of the oven. I give it a good 10-15 minutes to cool down somewhat and then set up, and then I cut into it. So there it is, what I think is the best pizza in the world. Been dying to know how this is going to taste. Well, I know how it's going to taste because I've made pizza so many times. Fresh from the oven. It's had a chance to cool down a little bit. Oh, that's so good. I love homemade pizza. The flavors in there. Of course, the Italian sausage and the pepperoni really come forward, which they should. But you can taste the mushrooms and the sauce and the cheese. Well, the whole thing. It's like a symphony of delicious Italian flavors. What can I tell you? Make homemade pizza. I mean, I know my friends all think they make the best pizza, but I know who makes the best pizza. Excuse me, I gotta have my dinner. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.